Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you. I'm not an early morning person, so the last time I saw any kind of a sunrise was about 40 years ago. Arcadia National Park, Cadillac Mountain. I don't know how many of you are even familiar with Cadillac Mountain. It's the first place in the continental United States where you see the sunrise. And it is the most remarkable and phenomenal view I've ever seen in my life. And I encourage you, if you're out on the East Coast, make a point of getting up there for sunrise at Cadillac Mountain. But I am passionate about sports here in the community, about the preservation of our sports history. I enjoy the challenge of researching and finding out information about individuals and teams and events. And I also enjoy the challenge of kind of the treasure hunt of trying to find memorabilia that lends itself to a lot of the stories. I did a little research because I always like to know a little bit about some of the folks here. And so I don't know how much you know about your own members and some of their sports involvement. So I thought I would just tell you real quickly a little bit. Now, is Brett Freshwaters here? He's not here. But I understand he's one of your members. And Brett went to the University of Oregon, and he was a member of the cross-country skiing national championship team. He participates in a lot of local races. He's a downhill skier and a cross-country skier. He completed the New York City Marathon and Canada's Ironman triathlon. And if you know anything about triathlon, to me, that's just one of the most grueling and challenging events to participate in. Now, I see Steve Gray. Steve, I haven't seen him in years, but Steve was 1 year behind me at Stadium. And so Steve started his wrestling career as a junior, and he led both his junior and senior year. And I know now that you enjoy golfing. And I have to tell a little story about Steve. And this is research at its best. I don't have this committed to memory. At 3 years old, his mom couldn't find him for half a day until she found him sleeping in the linen closet. At 5 years old, he took swimming lessons at UPS. Now, he was sure his mother was there took him there to drown, so when it came time to jump into the pool, he quickly moved to the back of the line. At 10 years old, his dad told him not to dive off the bulkhead at their beach place because you might hit your head. Upon telling his father that's the chance you take, he dove, hit his head, and ended up in the emergency room. Now in junior high, he participated in intramural track, took a tumble, and ended up in the hospital for that. At Stadium, his mom wanted him to turn out for basketball, but he refused to do so because he didn't like to run. Finally, over the years at birthdays, the family would always sing a little song that ended with the words, "Safely through the year." So Steve, on April 18th, when you turn 60, I hope you make it safely through the year. Is Alan Hughes here? Yeah, right there. All right. So Alan works with a good friend of mine, Gary Brooks, who was a former sports reporter for the Tacoma News Tribune. And Gary actually helped write one of the chapter in the book that I'll talk a little bit about soapbox derby racing. But as I understand, Alan was a swimmer and a water polo player down in California. And your daughters, Casey and Leslie, followed in your footsteps at Gig Harbor High School. And your daughter, Casey, just finished her career at the University of Redlands as a swimmer. Now, Rod, he comes from a long background, family steeped in tradition when it comes to tennis. His dad was very involved in playing and promoting and officiating and serving on numerous committees when it came to tennis, not just locally, but nationally as well. His mom helped establish the tennis program up at Donnerman. All three boys, Rod, Jamie, and Palmer, all played tennis there. They were all teaching professionals here in the community. Rod was a member of the '67 team that took second at state. And then in 1968, the Bellarmine team won the state championship. And Rod played doubles with John Galbraith, and they won the state doubles title. And then their teammate Jim Healy won the singles state championship, and it was the first time they had in the history of WIA tennis that they had three members all from the same team winning those state titles. So certainly a great accomplishment there. Now, Janet Oyar. Janet's athleticism was pretty much limited to running around the block. And then her husband taught her how to play tennis, and she became very proficient to the point where she was able to teach tennis. And so she taught her 3 children. 2 of them went to the University of Washington on a tennis scholarship, and then Sonia, her daughter, went to Pepperdine and had a very nice career at Pepperdine. She went to Bellarmine. Something about playing tennis at Bellarmine. They have a great program. But when she was at Bellarmine, phenomenal 4 years. She won the state singles championship all 4 years and had a perfect 92-0 singles record. I can't begin to fathom that. In 1992, she was named the Dick Haniel Amateur Athlete of the Year Award winner, and in 2006, we inducted her into the Tacoma-Pierce County Sports Hall of Fame. Pete Paredes. Pete's a longtime basketball official. I understand extremely reliable, dedicated, rock solid on the court. Interesting story about Pete. Apparently not too long ago, he called up his assigner and told him, hey, look, I'm really sorry. This is coming from a guy who never cancels out of games. He called up the assigner and said, hey, look, I'm really sorry. My wife surprised me. She got me two tickets to Florida. And so we had 2 choices. Either you find me a replacement for those games so I can go to Florida with my wife, or I'll work the games and give you the tickets and you go to Florida with my wife. And that's dedication. Is Jim Walton here? No. Semi-pro football started back in the late 1930s with a team called Alt Heidelberg. And then they existed for a couple of years. And then in 1946, Tacoma's first pro football team, the Tacoma Indians, they played for 1 season. Marv Tomervik and Marv Harshman, who were great athletes out of PLU, played on that team. And then semi-pro football showed back up back in 1962 in the form of the Tacoma Tyes. Now, and they played for 4 years, and they won a championship in '65 before the team dissolved. Well, as a city manager, sometimes you have to know how to go on offense mode sometimes, and sometimes you need to be a little shifty when it comes to defense. And Jim Walton was a safety and a defensive back for the Tacoma Tyes in '64 and '65. He's 6'1", 185 pounds, out of San Diego Junior College. So that's a little bit about some of your members. And I did learn a little bit more about Dave Fehrenbach playing the slow pitch and well, Nick, stay. So Nick was telling me about he played basketball at Curtis, and he played for the Little Dribblers. So I asked him, so tell me, do you know anything about the Cheney Stud Courtiers? And he didn't. So the Cheney Stud Courtiers was formed back in the '60s, and most of the boys were 11, 12, and 13. Obviously, it was sponsored by Cheney Lumber Company. And it was the most phenomenal organization that I'd ever become familiar with. They toured up and down the West Coast, putting on exhibitions before pro basketball games, during halftime of college basketball games, University of Oregon, Oregon State, University of Washington. They would play up at halftime of University of Puget Sound and PLU. That was the Cheney Stud Courtiers. A little bit about my journey with sports and sports history. And I'll go on and on and on. I know I'm going to exceed, so if you need to go, I understand. I'll try and leave a couple minutes for opportunity for questions. But I was passionate about baseball, and in particular, when I joined the Tacoma Athletic Commission, and a dear friend of mine, Clay Huntington, I approached him and I said, Clay, I read an article in the newspaper about a sports museum, but I don't see one. What's going on? He said, well, TAC, Tacoma Athletic Commission, was this organization that put together the bond issue, the successful bond issue for the Tacoma Dome. And when they got done with that campaign, they had $25,000 left over, and they committed it for a sports museum, but nobody was doing anything about it. So I approached Clay and I said, let's do something about it. And so we worked behind the scenes for a couple years, raised the monies, contacted the Dome, got the space available at no charge, contacted the original architect for the Dome, got them to commit to doing the plans at no charge, got the original contractor and got him to agree to build it for 10% over cost. And then we went public with the idea, raised a little under $500,000, and we were able to construct the Shanneman Sports Museum at the Tacoma Dome, which opened up in 1994. Now, it's a little known secret. How many of you even knew about the Sports Museum? So not half, and that's not unusual. Now you know about it. How many have been in it? Okay, well, thank you. Back when we opened up, there were lots of sports events down at Tacoma, football games, and we had the Tacoma Rockets, and we had the Tacoma Stars soccer, and so it was nice. It was a perfect opportunity. Now there's hardly any sports down there, and as a result, participation or individuals coming through there are minimal because we're all volunteer. We don't have any paid staff, so the hours are limited to when the Dome is open, and in particular certain special events, home show, garden show, boat show, holiday show, some of those kinds of events. So we are actually in the process of looking for a different location that's more accessible and available to the public. But there's all kinds of memorabilia in there, and I'll try and provide Rod maybe with some website addresses so you could go on and take a look at it and do kind of a virtual tour. But there we have about 40 different sports that are represented in there. Skiing, soapbox derby racing, marbles, figure skating, curling, hockey, baseball, softball, golf, mountain climbing, you name it, we just about have it. Hydroplane race, I go on and on and on. And I'll show you some of the items and just talk a little bit about that. But when we opened up the museum, it was A, I wanted to have things that we could display that people would enjoy. B, there were so many stories behind finding the artifacts and meeting with individuals that I wanted to try and come up with a book. And so back in about 2002, I came up with this harebrained idea, let's do a book on the history of all sports in our community. And so the upshot was that in 2005, we were able to put together this book called Playgrounds to the Pros, an illustrated history of sports in Tacoma, Pierce County. And so again, it was just a fun project. We set it up to where we had raised about $200,000 to publish the book, and also put on a big event at the Tacoma Dome called the Banquet of Champions, where we inducted a number of individuals in the Tacoma Pierce County Sports Hall of Fame, unveiled the book. It was the largest sports banquet ever held in Tacoma. We had a little over 2,000 people on the main floor of the Dome. We had people from all over the country come to that. It was just a fun celebration of our sports history. And then 2 years ago, in 2009, when the Tacoma Rainiers announced that they were going to remodel Cheney Stadium, I'm passionate about baseball. That's my first love. And so I thought, well, okay, I kind of wanted to do a book on baseball. It's now or never. So I did put together a book. You've seen these books, similar books. You had a guest speaker a couple weeks ago, as I understand, Joy Longy talked to you about the Tacoma Stadium, and she had done a book like this. So I put this book, it came out last spring, about baseball in Tacoma, Pierce County. It also covers fast pitch softball as well. And again, it was just kind of something fun that I wanted to do, and just kind of a way of giving back to the community. So I was talking to a gentleman who said he saw me on TV last night, and I didn't even know it was on, but there was a documentary on TV Tacoma, Channel 12, called Invincible. And so I guess they were playing that here recently. And all the month of April, the Tacoma Public Library is promoting April as Tacoma Reads, and they're going to be reading a couple of different books, but there'll be a number of special events going on about baseball. The one I'm excited about is on Monday, April 16th from 7 to 9 at the Public Library. We're going to have Bob Robertson, a longtime broadcaster, is going to be the moderator, and we have 4 individuals that play pro baseball they're from Tacoma. John Bergenser, who played for Tacoma and the San Francisco Giants in the 60s. Wes Stock, who played in the Baltimore organization. He was with the Oakland organization as a pitching coach. Jim Nettles, who his brother was a third baseman for the New York Yankees. Jim played in the Oakland organization and also played here in Tacoma. And Doug Sisk, a stadium grad, who played with Baltimore and Atlanta, played with the New York Mets in the World Series. And they're going to be the panel, and they're going to talk about the behind-the-scenes things in baseball. And these guys are four great storytellers. Just want to tell you some of the things about, a little bit about some of the memorabilia. One of my favorite stories is about the Tacoma Rockets. I was visiting with a fellow by the name of Joey Johns, who was a longtime hockey player with Tacoma back in the 1940s. And I was looking for a uniform, and I was over at the house talking to Joey, and I said, well, hey, what about a jacket? And he said, well, yeah, I got a jacket, but you don't want that. And I said, well, why? And he says, oh, no. He says, I wear that jacket when I work on the car to change the oil. And I said, no, I want to see that jacket. He said, Marjorie, we need to throw that jacket out. I said, no, you're not throwing that jacket out. So I got him to go get me the jacket, and he was right. It was caked in grease and mud and dirt. And I took the jacket and I took it to Family Cleaners, and they did an amazing job of cleaning it up, took it over to Quality Knitting, and they repaired it. This isn't the jacket, but this is what it looks like. I took Joey's jacket and I put it down in the sports museum, and when we had the grand opening, Joey came walking by and he says, oh, wow, that's awesome. I see you found a jacket. I said, that's yours, Joey. But this is what the jacket looked like back in about 1947. This was their jacket. Talk a little bit about baseball. Tacoma's had a great history of baseball. They started back in 1890 was the first game. And back in the 50s, they had a lot of town teams, so community teams. So you had teams McKinley Hill, 6th Avenue, 38th Street, Fern Hill, and 26th and Proctor. And so this is a uniform, this was actually a hand-me-down. So this uniform, without the 26th and Proctor, was worn by the Tacoma Tigers team of the Western International League back in 1947. And then they turned it down. And this uniform actually belonged to a fellow named Dick Palmadesi, who was a longtime baseball coach at Wilson High School. But this was used in the City League back about 1949. And if you lift one of these puppies up and you start wondering how in the heck could they have played in these things, because they are heavy, and the pants are here as well. Of course, one of my favorite items is this item, and this is what women's fast pitch team wore here in Tacoma back in the mid-1950s. This was the uniform, and there's their pants, shorts, whatever, and of course those of you who saw League of Their Own will kind of get an idea of this. And I had no idea there was a Hollywood Boat and Motor there actually still exists out on about 48th and South Tacoma Way, and I went in and tracked the company down, and I mean the sponsor, he was long gone, and talked to his son. They were still operating it, and they went up in the attic, and he says, you know what, I've had this box of uniforms, and I'm so happy to get rid of these. And I was so happy to take them off his hands. Of course, you remember if you're soccer, Tacoma Tides was the very first pro soccer team to compete in 1976. They played out at Cheney Stadium. Ruth Gardner was instrumental in forming that ball club. They were a one-year phenom. The backup goalie was a guy by the name of Bruce Arena, who went on to great fame as a U.S. national soccer team coach and a longtime coach in the current MISL. This uniform here was worn by John Halana. John, back in the great 2001 season of the Tacoma of the Seattle Mariners, when they won had their phenomenal run of wins. And John was a member of that team, but he was struggling, and so he was sent down to Tacoma. And so Brett Tomko was his teammate. So on, I believe it was July 3rd, Brett goes out and throws a no-hitter. And 4 days later, John goes out and threw the first perfect game in the 99-year history of the Pacific Coast League. And this is the uniform that John wore. Well, Pat McMurtry, a very well-known boxer here, really put boxing on the map in Tacoma back in the 50s. At one time was the 4th ranked heavyweight in the world. And he fought several times at Lincoln Bowl. And this is a picture of the setup of Lincoln Bowl when they had boxing in 57. And I would love, I like doing special events. I understand you like doing special events. Now this is an event that kind of has me intrigued because I wasn't around. I can't imagine them doing a setup like this, outdoors, boxing on a nice summer night. I mean, it just sounds too much fun. I don't know if my wife would let me take this one on, but it sounds fun. Anybody know anything about Herman Brix? So Herman Brix was a 1924 graduate of Stadium High School. Went on to the University of Washington, where he played football. They participated in the 26 Rose Bowl against Alabama. This is a picture taken when they were down in Pasadena. If you come up here, you'll recognize Douglas Fairbanks. This was his estate, and so this was a team picture that they took. And then Herman went on to, he was quite a track athlete. So he won a silver medal in the shot put in the 1928 Amsterdam Olympic Games. They struck up he had a good friendship with Fairbanks. Fairbanks invited him to stay with him and train down in Los Angeles, and he continued to do that. He did not end up participating anymore in track, but he went on to be Tarzan in the movies and had an outstanding career, changed his name to Bruce Bennett. And if you were to Google Herman Brix or Bruce Bennett, you would see a long list of movie credits. Probably the most famous is Treasure of the Sierra Madre with Humphrey Bogart. And I got to know Herman. He was just this gentle giant of a guy. Went down and visited him in his home in LA, and then several years ago, before he passed away, he came up to Tacoma, and we took him over to his old house right by Jason Lee, and we took him down to Stadium Bowl where he played. And there's a photo over here. If you get a chance to see, you'll see a picture of Herman with the Stadium High School down in the dirt. And I was able to get Herman to sign this while we were visiting. He lived to be 100 years old, and he was just a really neat guy. So I could go on and on and on. I mean, well, I'll tell you one more. So back in 1909, 1910, OBAC made, it was the OBAC Tobacco Company. They had little cigarettes. And inside in those 2 years, they had baseball cards. There's a whole series of Tacoma baseball cards, both 1910 and 1911. This particular card is that of a ball player. He was originally from Seattle. He was a prominent judge there by the name of 10 Million. Now, when he was born, his grandmother convinced mother, bribed her with $50 to name him 10, thus 10 Million. So when their daughter was born, he had no choice. She was known as Dixie, her real name, Decillion. Decillion Million, daughter 10 Million. And that's his card here. Babe Ruth came to Tacoma in 1924, did a barnstorming tour, and came back again in 1926 and played golf out at Fircrest Golf Course. There is a picture over here of when Babe was playing down at Stadium Bowl. He played on the Tacoma team, but played against the Aberdeen Black Cats, so that's the team over there. And I did bring a ball that he had signed back in 1924. There was a gentleman here in town by the name of George Carpatch, and George's dad took him to the game and got the ball, and then he gave the ball to his son. And they kept going to Tacoma Tiger games in 1939, and so George didn't realize that, you know, the value of those balls would escalate if you didn't put other signatures on them. So he just got all kinds of signatures of Tacoma ball players from 1938 and 1939, which is the right thing to do. Just go out and enjoy the memorabilia. I've got championship rings up there from all the championship teams. I will tell you one more. I wanted, the challenge was to try, for me anyway, I wanted to get a uniform from each Tacoma team, a cap, a jacket. I promised my wife I would not get obsessed. It only lasted so long. But the very first team, the very first championship team for Tacoma baseball team was 1904. The Tacoma Tigers, 1904. They won the PCL championship. And so I kept trying to think, how am I going to find, what did they get? I had no idea. And then I came across this beer serving tray, and you needed to know what you're looking for. So it talks about Pacific beer, and it has this tiger at the bottom. Way down here at the bottom, it says the two champions. It was Pacific Beer and the Tacoma Tigers. So that's the story behind that. So, okay, I lied, one more. So Tacoma had three ball players when they were with the Oakland organization that went on to become Rookie of the Years. Pretty unusual. I don't think it'll ever happen again. You had Jose Canseco, who played here, and I believe it was '85. And then the next year in Oakland, he was Rookie of the Year. Then you had Mark McGuire. Next year, he was Rookie of the Year. Then you had Walt Weiss, the shortstop. And then his first year and with the Oakland, he won Rookie of the Year. So I actually have in my collection all three uniforms of all three players autographed when they played for Tacoma. And I just happened to bring Mark McGuire's uniform with me. And again, it's autographed here. So anyway, those are just some of the stories. Anybody here of the Amacat baseball team? Anybody know what Amacat is?
Tacoma Tiger.
Thank you. Tacoma spelled backwards. So it was part of, and this will be my last story, Chris, honest. If you believe that. So yes, Amacat, and they were part of West Coast Grocery. And so that was a marketing thing. So you might see coffee and spices called Amacat. And so they had a baseball team from 1901 to 1906. And that's one of the Amacat uniforms. I was pretty stoked when I found this one. So anyway, I will be happy to stick around and show you some other items. I didn't show you the 1915 trophy up there. That was from a South Tacoma Tiger baseball team. They traveled by ship down to San Francisco in 1915 to play a team out of Cleveland for the World Amateur Championship. I didn't show you that one, and I can talk about that. And listen, thank you very much for allowing me to come, and I'll stick around and answer any questions I can.